There are many misconceptions about Post-Stalin USSR. We will analyze and debunk them all. In this series, we will discuss many topics, such as state of the whole people, peaceful coexistence, the Post-Stalin USSR economy, the fall of the USSR, and many more topics. So if you are interested in Post-Stalin USSR, be it as a leftist or just a curious person in general, just lay back and enjoy my video. Debunking Misconceptions about Post-Stalin USSR, Episode 3, De-Stalinization and Re-Stalinization. Before we start this video, I want to say that this video will be technically divided into 3 parts. The first part will be about de-Stalinization, the second part will be about Re-Stalinization, the third will be about de-Stalinization under Gorbachev. Anyway, before we start, I also want to say that what part 1 will consist of. It will be shown on screen as well. And we will talk about what de-Stalinization under Nikita Khrushchev was. We will talk about part 3 and 2 later, though, when we arrive there. Anyway, here's part 1, de-Stalinization. It consists of the following things. Denouncing Stalin's cult of personality, meaning that his statues were destroyed, places named after him were renamed back to what they were called. For example, Stalingrad was renamed back to Volgograd. Stalin's involvement in Yezhov's massacres and crimes, Stalin's deportations, and the doctor's plot. Also, we will be debunking Grover Fuhrer a lot in this video, okay? So we usually debunk Mao and Hoxha, but in this episode, we will mostly try to debunk, what's his name again? Grover Fuhrer. Okay, anyway, we'll also talk about more in part 1, specifically about the following, as the secret speech was published, and international response. Yeah, basically I just summarized de-Stalinization. In public, Stalin's cult of personality was denounced, and inside the party a lot of his crimes were criticized as well, but he was still praised. We will talk about all this later. Let's start with Stalin's personality cult though. Let me show you examples of Stalin praising himself and practicing his own cult of personality. Stalin is the worthy continuator of Lenin's work, or, as it is said in our party, Stalin is the Lenin of today. Joseph Stalin, the edition of short biography of Stalin, 1948, SIC. Stalin's military mastership was displayed both in defense and on offense. Comrade Stalin's genius enabled him to divine the enemy's plans and defeat them. The battles in which Comrade Stalin directed the Soviet armies are brilliant examples of operational military skill. Joseph Stalin, the edition of short biography of Stalin, 1948 SIC. The original first quote just said that Stalin is the Lenin of today, but with Stalin's handwriting, there were added the words, Stalin is the worthy continuer of the cause of Lenin, or as it is said in the party, to praise himself even more. And he praised himself even more by calling himself a genius. This book was originally written by other people, but was eventually added by Stalin in 1948. Stalin also signed documents to build sculptures after himself. Stalin signed the decree of the Soviet Council of Ministers on the construction of the sculpture of I.V. Stalin on the Volga-Don Canal. Near Stalingrad, a cantilever statue of the leader soon grew up. The statue was favored by birds, and within a few weeks it was finished from head to foot. Folk craftsmen, after thinking about it, decided to bring the current to the sculpture. Birds that dared to sit on the head of the coryphus of all sciences were killed, and soon the corpses of the unfortunate in several layers covered the ground. The stench spread for miles. spread 4 kilometers, and the current had to be turned off. The statue was covered in droppings again. Source: This History of the USSR, Chronicle of the Great Country, 1917 to 1991, by Andrew Solgen. What did Marx, Engels, and Lenin think of such behavior? Let's see. Neither of us cares to straw for popularity. Let me cite one proof of this. Such was my aversion to the personality cult that at the time of the International, when plagued by numerous moves originating from various countries to accord me public honor, I never let one of these two enter the domain of publicity, nor did I ever reply to them, save with an occasional snap. When Engels and I first joined the secret communist society, we did so only on condition that anything conducive to a superstitious belief in authority be eliminated from the rules. Karl Marx, letter to Wilhelm Bloss, November 10th, 1877. I note with deep dissatisfaction that my person is being glorified. This is annoying and harmful. All of us know that personalities have nothing to do with it. It would be awkward for myself to prohibit that sort of thing. There would also be something ridiculous and pretentious about it. It is up to you to put the brakes on unobtrusively. Vladimir Lenin, September 1918, and my sources: Lenin, a biography by Institute of Marxism-Leninism, CPSU. I messed up this source. What is it called? The source name a bit. As you can see, I didn't press the spacebar a few times. I hope this is fine, okay? You can't imagine how unpleasant I find the constant promotion of my personality. Vladimir Lenin. The source for this is Lenin, a biography by Institute of Marxism-Leninism, CPSU. As we can see, personality cults are anti-Marxist, and Marx, Engels, and Lenin define it as praising someone or promoting someone's personality, which as we can see they opposed, especially Lenin. And Stalin promoted his personality, praised himself, and signed orders to build Stalin statues himself. Statues are yet another way of praising someone or promoting someone's personality, just like renaming places after a person or personality. So yes, Stalin, as we can see, violated a small principle of Marxism and Marxism-Leninism, and this was corrected by his successors. Now, does this mean that the USSR stopped praising Stalin completely? No, to quote Khrushchev. Comrades, so as not to repeat errors of the past, the Central Committee has declared itself resolutely against the cult of the individual. We consider that Stalin was extolled to excess. However, in the past, Stalin undoubtedly performed great services to the party, to the working class, and to the international workers' movement. This question is complicated by the fact that all this which we have just discussed was done during Stalin's life under his leadership and with his concurrence. Here, Stalin was convinced that this was necessary for the defense of the interests of the working classes against the plotting of enemies and against the attack of the imperialist camp. He saw this from the position of the interests of the working class, of the interests of the laboring people, of the interests of the victory of socialism and communism. We cannot say that these were the deeds of a giddy despot. He considered that this should be done in the interest of the party, of the working masses, in the name of the defense of the revolution's gains. In this lies the whole tragedy. Nikita Khrushchev, the 20th Congress of the CPSU. Basically, Khrushchev here says that Stalin still did a lot of good things and did a lot for socialism, the working class, the USSR, and so on. What those things were specifically is what I will tell in part 3 of this video. Khrushchev also here says that Stalin's crimes in fact weren't even crimes, but failed attempts to protect his country and defend socialism and the working class. This part of the secret speech is often ignored by Stalinists. Also, as you can see, Khrushchev cited Stalin every 2 seconds in his literature. If you're wondering, this book that I'm showing right now is called War Without Conquest, and also, Khrushchev even said that the purges were good. Let's quote him. We must affirm that the party fought a serious fight against the Trotskyites, rightists, and bourgeois nationalists, and that it disarmed ideologically all the enemies of Leninism. This ideological fight was carried on successfully, as a result of which the party became strengthened and tempered. Here, Stalin played a positive role. The party led a great political, ideological struggle against those in its own ranks who proposed anti-Leninist theses, I don't know how to pronounce this, theses, I think, yeah, who represented the political line hostile to the party and to the cause of socialism. This was a stubborn and a difficult fight, but a necessary one, because the political line of both the Trotskyite, Zinoyevite bloc and of the Bukharinites led actually toward the restoration of capitalism and toward capitulation to the world bourgeoisie. Let us consider for a moment what would have happened if in 1928 to 1929 the political line of right deviation had prevailed among us, or orientation toward cotton dress industrialization or toward the kulak, etc. We would not uh, we would not now have a powerful heavy industry. We would not have the kolkhozes. We would find ourselves disarmed and weak in a capitalist encirclement. It was for this reason that the party led an inexorable ideological fight, explaining to all its members and to the non-party masses that the harm and the danger of the anti-Leninist proposals of the Trotskyite opposition and the rightist opportunists. And this great work of explaining the party line bore fruit. Both the Trotskyites and the rightist opportunists were politically isolated. An overwhelming party majority supported the Leninist line, and the party was able to awaken and organize the working masses to apply the Leninist line and to build socialism. A fact worth noting is that extreme repressive measures were not used against the Trotskyites, the Zinovievites, the Bukharinites, and others. During the course of the furious ideological fight against them, the fight in the 1920s was on ideological grounds, but some years later, when socialism in our country was fundamentally constructed, when the exploiting classes were generally liquidated, when Soviet social structure had radically changed, when the social basis for political movements and groups hostile to the party had violently contracted, when the ideological opponents of the party were long since defeated politically, then repression directed against them began. It was precisely during this period, 1935 to 1937 to 1938, that the practice of mass repression through the government apparatus was born, first against the enemies of Leninism, Trotskyites, Zinovievites, Bukharinites, long since politically defeated by the party, and subsequently also against many honest communists, against those party cadres who had borne the heavy load of the civil war in the first and most difficult years of industrialization and collectivization, who had fought actively against the Trotskyites, and the rightists fought the Leninist party line. Nikita Khrushchev, the 20th Congress of the CPSU. Basically, Khrushchev here praises Stalin's role in the ideological fight against the Trotskyists, Bukharinites, and Zinovievites, who, according to him, would have restored capitalism and were anti-Leninists. Seriously, this take is extremely hilarious. You would not expect this from Khrushchev. You would expect this from someone like Stalin. At the same time, Khrushchev praises Stalin's great purges as they got rid of these threats, such as the Bukharinites. He also praised Stalin's role in collectivization and building a socialist planned economy, but at the same time, he said that some honest communists died, with which we can all agree with, such as Rudzotak Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on now to Stalin's involvement in Yezhov's crimes and massacres. Very good. In the future, keep digging and cleaning out this filth out of Polish spies. They should be exterminated. That's what the interests of the USSR demand. Stalin, a report to Yezhov. Source: Stalin, The Court of the Red Tsar by Montefiore Simon Sebak. In this report, Stalin congratulated Yezhov on his national operations and massacres. As we can see, Stalin was involved in Yezhov's crimes and massacres, no ifs and no buts. Yezhov's crimes and massacres were decided by Stalin, and without Stalin's orders and Stalin's sanctions, Yezhov could not have done this. Anyway, Yezhov's crimes also were happening for 2 years, so it's impossible for Stalin to not notice what he did. I think that we have said enough about it. Stalin's involvement in Yezhov's crimes and massacres, since we even gave historical documents as evidence. Let's move on to Stalin's deportations, and let's give 5 examples of Stalin's deportations. Let's start with Mesatian Turks. Depending upon the source, the figure ranges between 90,000 and 116,000 deportees. In some half of them were minors under the age of 16, 27,000 women, and there were 19,000 old or handicapped men. In 1944, at the time of the deportation, nearly 40,000 Georgians were fighting at the front. Only 20,000 survived and had to join the exiles in Central Asia. On the contrary, 27,000 of 40,000 Mesatian Turks in the Red Army died fighting Nazi forces. So if we use logical sense right now, right? 45,000 were children, so they were not capable of fighting for the Germans, and they weren't capable of being spies or anything like that. So that's half. We have 45,000 remaining. So we have 19,000 old or handicapped men then. So then we only have 26,000 left, around that number, okay? And as we can see, 40,000, right, helped the, what is it called? They fought for the Red Army, right? And yeah, a lot of them died. 13,000 remained, so it's impossible for the Mesatian Turks to be logically spies or collaborators, right? Okay, so let's move on now to the Crimean Tatars. The Chechens not only were unable to collaborate with the Germans, but also never truly saw any of them. Also, there was an insurgency in Chechnya in World War II, and only 14 people, 14 Chechens and Ingushetchens, or however you pronounce it, participated in the insurgency against the Soviet Union, and I guess 50 German and German trade saboteurs, okay? But that's it. Of a population of 200,000. Of March 1949 deportees, over 70% of people were women and children under the age of 16. So this is for the Estonian deportation, and most were kids. This is unacceptable. Okay, and here is the last deportation we will talk about, and that's the deportation of Russian Germans. Okay, lightning advance prompted a panicked and paranoid Soviet dictator, Joseph Stalin, to order the roundup of ethnic Germans, whom he perceived as potential Nazi collaborators. He deported them because he deported an entire nation because they were potential collaborators. Let that sink in. This is unacceptable. Children, women, men, and so on. He deported them all. Also, I want to quickly mention the testament of Lenin. Basically, it's real. I mean, we know this is real because Lenin's wife, Nadezhda Krupskaya, published it. So we can be sure that it's real. Like, why would Lenin's wife lie? Anyway, now let's move on to the publication of the secret speech. In February 1956, the 20th Conference of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union was held in Moscow. At the conference, Nikita Khrushchev, the party's first secretary and ruler of the Soviet Union, delivered a secret speech on February 24th, condemning Stalin's crimes. The secrecy of the speech was maintained, but fragmented information about its contents was widespread throughout the world. The intelligence services of Western countries have set the primary task of obtaining a copy of the speech of all the intelligence services in the world. It was the Israeli intelligence that obtained the copy of the speech through Viktor Gruevsky. Also, this only applies to capitalist countries like the USA and Israel. Well, I'm not sure if Israel was capitalist at the time, but yeah. This mostly applies to capitalist countries and NATO and stuff like that. For socialist countries, it's a bit different, which we will discuss now. In the USSR, the secret speech wasn't published in 1956. All what was published was a condemnation of Stalin's cult, but at the same time, the Soviet authorities praised Stalin in that publication. In which Stalin's cult was criticized. As you can see in the picture that I'm showing right now of the publication, I mean of 2 pages of the publication, the USSR still praised Stalin. They praised collectivization, they praised socialist construction, they praised Stalin defending his country and so on. Now, how did others get the secret speech, like social states, like the governments? Let's look. All night long, I read the secret report of Nikita Khrushchev that he gave to us, as he did the same with all other foreign delegations. The report rejects the figure and all the acts of the great Stalin. I understood the position of Khrushchev and his other companions against Stalin and his glorious acts during the meeting of the Congress where Stalin's name wasn't mentioned even once for anything good, but I never thought at that time that they could ever come to this point. I shudder when I think how much the bourgeoisie and reactionaries will rejoice when they get this report in their hands, for I'm sure they will launch a campaign of lies, and who knows how much that will last. Tito should be very glad after reading this report, as I am sure he has read it. What an Wait, how do you pronounce this? Incalculable damage for the Soviet Union and the socialist camp. What an embarrassing responsibility in front of history. I cannot put anything onto paper. It's too little to say I'm shocked. End the Hoja on the closeted speech of Khrushchev on Stalin, February 26, 1956, Moscow. I showed Enver Hoxha's private comments on the secret speech right now. As you can see, he posted and said that Khrushchev gave it to all foreign delegates. Foreign delegates as in all Marxist governments throughout Eurasia. This leads me to my next section of the video, which is international response. We will only talk about how Marxist states responded though. Anyway, we will first talk about how Hoxha responded to it more a bit, and then about Mao, then about Kim Il-sung, and then about the Eastern Bloc. Okay, I showed Hoxha's public views on the secret speech right now. Okay, now, so let's look at what Mao said now. During the later part of his life, Stalin took more and more pleasure in this cult of the individual and violated the party system of democratic centralism and the principle of combining collectorship with individual responsibility. As a result, he made some serious mistakes. For example, he broadened the scope of the suppression of counter-revolution. He lacked the necessary vigilance on the eve of the anti-fascist war. He failed to pay proper attention to the further development of agriculture and the material welfare of peasantry. He gave He gave certain wrong advice on the international communist movement and in particular made the wrong decision on the question of Yugoslavia. On these issues, Stalin fell victim to subjectivism and one-sidedness and divorced himself from objective reality and from the masses. The cult of the individual is a rotten carryover from the long history of mankind. The cult of the individual was rooted not only in exploiting classes, but also in the small producers. As is well known, patriarchism is a product of small producer economy. The struggle against the cult of the individual, which was launched by the 20th Congress, is a great and courageous fight by the communists and the people of the Soviet Union to clear away the ideological obstacles blocking their advance. Mao Zedong, Stalin's place in history, extracted from the People's Daily editorial of 5th of April, 1956. Anyway, Mao hated Stalin and the Sino-Soviet blitz started on the Stalin. We will cover that more in around episode 9. Let's talk about Kim Il-sung now. North Korean reactions to the 20th Congress were highly enthusiastic. At the Central Committee session held on March 20, 1956, Kwari Yong-gong informed the leadership about his recent experiences in Moscow. Kim Il-sung also took the floor in the following debate. Significantly, the North Korean press did not publish Kim's speech and made only brief references to the one made by Kwari or Choi. I don't know how to pronounce his name. In early April, Nodon, Cinnamon, and other papers did carry a few articles that criticized the personality cult. These were, without exception, translations of Soviet and Chinese publications. They should be regarded as symbolic gestures aimed at preventing Soviet criticism rather than the expression of any domestic liberalization. Source: Valentine Kim Il-sung in the Khrushchev era. As for the Eastern Bloc, it pretty much supported De-Stalinization, excluding Hungary. Rákosi was overthrown, though, for being an incompetent leader, and he was the most unpopular leader in Eastern Europe. Anyway, now, let's show some evidence to him being incompetent and his rule being unstable. The plan required a special signal known as compass to be given, but the formulation of Volna at this stage indicates that Soviet leaders wanted a reliable fallback option in case their attempts to bolster political stability in Hungary failed. The growing reservations in Moscow about Hungary's political future turned out to be far more justified than the Soviet leaders had hoped. Although the ouster of Rákosi eliminated the most exigent problem in Hungary, it was hardly sufficient to put more than a temporary check on the growth of social discontent. Source: The Soviet Union in the 1956 crises in Hungary and Poland. Reassessments and new findings by Mark Krummer. Anyway, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, share, and subscribe. The summary to this video will be included in the third part of this episode, which I'll upload in a few days, I think on Sunday maybe, I don't know, but yeah, that's it for today's video. The summary will come later, and yeah, stay tuned for part 2 of episode 3.